So we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII. We're talking Rebirth today. We have something quite interesting because Game Informer put out a video with Naoki Hamaguchi, of course, the main director right now when it comes to FF7 Rebirth and I think the Remake project in general. And they asked him 129 goddamn questions. Now, rapid fire questions. It's a 16-minute video. I haven't watched it yet, so we're going to be kind of sort of watching this together, so to speak. It's not going to be a reaction video, but I'm going to watch through it and we'll stop and talk about things that need to be talked about.
Do these changes make this a multiverse story?
それはお答えできないですね。
The first one that we can kind of stop and talk about briefly. I'm not going to try to convince you of the multiple timelines or multiverse or whatever, that whole thing. When it comes to a remake project, everybody kind of already has their opinions on that. Remake's almost here, right? We got like a month and like 10 days or some shit till the game's dropping. We'll know at least, or hopefully have answers when it comes to Rebirth for that. But it's just one of those things, it's like when they ask that question, like if this was truly just like retelling FF7 or reimagining of FF7, why not say no? Like, what's the harm in, like, saying no, it's not multiverse, dude. We're just kind of reimagining, we're retelling the story, whatever. For him to be like, I can't answer that right now, it's a little interesting.
What does it mean now that the whispers are gone?
それはリバースをお楽しみにしてください。
The question and answer is just kind of weird because, like, for one, we know the whispers aren't gone. We've seen them in multiple trailers already. But also, like, during the coverage the Game Informer's been doing for the last couple of weeks, they've probably talked about the whispers returning. So why ask that question? Because they're not gone. But also, why wouldn't Hamaguchi also correct him and tell him, like, no, they're not gone. They're going to be in Rebirth. He doesn't have to tell us what they're going to do yet. But still, I don't know. Just a weird one. Probably didn't have to even respond to it.
How is Zack still around?
難しい質問ですね。どうやってきてるんでしょうかね。
I mean, do we even need to talk about that one? Joking aside, it's possible this entire time with the Zack stuff for the last couple of years, the devs have been kind of fucking with us, I guess, for lack of a better term, when it comes to the Zack stuff. But we've seen multiple occasions them like use the phrase or use the terms like him being alive, surviving death, escaping his fate, that whole thing. Even right here, Hamaguchi says, I wonder how he's alive, right? So it's possible that he could be dead and like, or in between death, not fully joined with the live stream. That's the whole thing. But then I'd be kind of pissed if that's the case because they've used like the phrases of him being alive this entire time. And that's not like deceptive or a red herring or that whole thing that people always talk about, right? That's just straight up lying to us. So if Zack is dead and this entire time they've been saying he's alive and he's survived and how do you survive and all that stuff, it's kind of rubbing the wrong way.
How does Zack being around affect Cloud?
そうですね。クラウドというより、この FF7 の世界全体に対してこう、ザックスを通していろんな問いかけをしています。
The answer itself right there is kind of vague. We're not even really going to talk about that. But something I wanted to discuss kind of briefly is one of the reasons I'm kind of hoping that Zack's alive is just because of those character interactions that we could have, like just Zack and like Barrett, or like Zack and like Red 13, Vincent, talking to these characters that he's never been able to talk to because he's dead, right? He dies prior to the events of FF7. And also like him just like reuniting with Aerith, that could be like a fantastic fucking moment. Him getting to see Yuffie again. He's seen little kid Yuffie all those years ago, getting to meet, the more grown up Yuffie now. And they can remember each other, talk about them meeting in Fort Tamblyn and all the little missions you get to do with like Yuffie throughout like Crisis Core and stuff like that. There's like all kinds of interesting shit that can happen with Zack being alive. And also just rematch with Sephiroth and other characters from the compilation that Zack would know or hasn't ever met before that would be just so interesting. Like him being alive for the remake project is so fucking more interesting than him just being potentially dead and just not realizing it. Like it can be good there. That can be like a sad, tragic story, but there's so many more opportunities with him being alive.
Why isn't Crisis Core Reunion part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake canon?
リメイク自体は他の今のコンピレーションしている作品とは違う独立した世界設定で描いているからですね。
This is another question answer that I thought was just kind of weird because I think they have said before in the past that like directly like Crisis Core is not canon to Remake. But the thing is though, they said like years ago that the Remake project, or at least Final Fantasy VII Remake, is like the 5th part of the compilation, which is Crisis Core is one of those things. So Crisis Core and Remake are in the compilation together, but Crisis Core itself's not canon to Remake, which is kind of weird. And I know they talked about like Zack surviving at the end of Remake, but him dying at the end of Crisis Core would make sense by the end of the Remake, trilogy or whatever. Like there's a lot of confusing shit there. Like it doesn't make sense that Crisis Core isn't canon to that because obviously the events of Crisis Core still happen. Even whether Zack's dead or alive with the Remake project doesn't matter. Prior to the beginning of FF7 Remake, Zack still died and passed the bus sword on the cloud. So it is canon. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Whatever. But also, we can't ignore Hamaguchi saying that Remake itself is a unique world that's distinct from the other titles, which that doesn't sound like simply just retelling FF7, right?
Do you ever just listen to Final Fantasy music?
はい、もちろんあります。学生の頃、マイバイブルでした。バイブルって言わないのかななんて言うんだろう。
So that part was kind of funny, to be honest, showing a little bit of his personality. The fact that he says he used to listen to like Final Fantasy music back in the day as a student, and that it was his vibe, and then he's got to like stop and pause and be like, is that what we say? Is that what the kids are saying these days? My vibe?
Are there any other games in the Final Fantasy series that the team considered to remake before settling on 7?
北瀬は検討していたと思います。
I can't remember exactly, but I think I pulled up the quote before that I think Kitase was interested in doing like a Final Fantasy V remake if given the opportunity at some point. Which I don't know nothing about that game. I feel like that's one people don't talk about enough, so I don't know if it's good or bad. I've definitely never played Final Fantasy V. But that is kind of interesting. I hope they do more remakes going forward. Whether or not that's an actual just like visual kind of remake or whatever the fuck, or if it's like an actual in the vein of like the remake project where they want to like kind of remake it like, and looks like a modern game or whatever, it looks like realistic and shit or whatever. However you want to do it, it's fine. Just I hope they do that going forward. There's a lot of like, you know, the older Final Fantasies could benefit from that. Whichever ones, I don't care really.
Do you think we'll ever get Final Fantasy X-3?
私もプレイしてみたいですね。
But you know we got to put a little emphasis on that. It's kind of funny to ask a Final Fantasy X related question during like an interview for like 7 Rebirth and shit. I think it'll happen eventually, of course. There's already been like, what is it? I think Nojima had like a script or an idea at least for the third game, and I don't know if they're gonna do like the Final Fantasy X 2.5 shit or Final Fantasy X will follow up on that with Sin being alive or whatever the fuck. I don't know if they're gonna do all that. If they do, I wouldn't mind it. I think the idea of like a X-3 that's actually a prequel where you're following like Jack, Braska, and Orin's story, I think that could be really fun. That's a little more interesting than what we have with like Ten Will and shit.
What's your favorite moment from the original Final Fantasy VII?
一番こう記憶に残ってるのはやっぱりこうエアリスのワスラルル都のシーンですね。
We'll put a little emphasis on that too, because it's kind of interesting to like just outright talk about that. Just because in the past, when they talked about the game ending at Forgotten Capital, they've always been vague, like talking about like characters' fates, like this character, that character's fate, whatever. Never directly saying Aerith. And then somewhat recently, one of our videos, I don't remember where it was, maybe the Game Informer interview or something. They just like outright talk about Aerith's fate. Then right here we have straight up, Hamaguchi talking about Aerith's fate at the Forgotten City, and it's like it's one of those reasons that I think things can be different, because they're just being very open about like something crazy happened in Forgotten Capital. In more recent interviews, especially with Game Informer, they're like straight up talking about Aerith's fate at Forgotten Capital, like letting you know, even if you're like a brand new player who doesn't know FF7 story, that she's supposed to fucking die there. So it's just like why I think things can be different. I don't know how, I don't know what exactly is going to happen, if anything at all is going to be different. It's just why like I'm in that kind of camp of things might be different.
Will we see Red 13 trying to stand on 2 legs again?
多分皆さんの期待にお答えできると思いますね。
Seems to be maybe confirming that we might get like the dressing up sequence from the OG FF7 where we dress up in like Shinra outfits, obviously Barrett's sailor outfit everybody wants to see. I will say that we have seen the trailer at Cloud walking on the deck of the ship without an outfit on, right? Just regular looking Cloud, but that could be like a little deceptive, as in like that could just be like you riding the ship back from like Costa del Sol to Junon or Junon to Costa del Sol, like in a non-story moment, and maybe that's why Cloud doesn't have the Shinra like outfit on, but this maybe seems to confirm that, which would be kind of interesting. It's kind of funny because I did a video years ago about things I don't think will happen when it comes to the remake project or FF7 Remake. I think at the time we didn't know the game was going to be Midgar only, so I was talking about shit that took place after Remake. But one of them was like our group dressing up, and namely Red 13 dressing up in like the Shinra outfit, because it wouldn't make sense, because Remake is obviously fantastical, but it's a little more grounded than a lot of other Final Fantasies, and like trying to pass off Red 13 standing up on his hind legs with a flaming tail just would look ridiculous. As much as I do want to see it, I just don't know if it's going to happen, and it remains to be seen, I guess.
What's the best summon in Final Fantasy history?
私バハムートゼロだっけゼロでいいんだっけゼロでいいんだっけあれってカイって言うんだっけなんか子供心に漢字に憧れてたのをすごく記憶に残っています。
This was obviously kind of long, but I think he's trying to remember how to say Bahamut Zero in English, because I guess it's Bahamut Kai in Japanese. But I've said it before in previous videos that me and Hamaguchi are best friends. Growing up, dude, Bahamut Zero was absolutely my favorite summon, like in FF7. Like once I learned that was a summon you could get, and seeing the animation of this Bahamut just flying around in space and shooting a goddamn laser from orbit or whatever, like that shit was so fucking cool, man.
What's the best Sid in Final Fantasy history?
私FF12 のアルシドはちょっと指導を少しもじりつつすごく独特なキャラクターで好きでした。
Question and answer is not really that important. I don't even necessarily agree with it. I don't think the Sid in 12's like that great of a character. I don't think he's like necessarily bad. I definitely like the 7 and 10 Sid infinitely more. But one of the reasons I do like Hamaguchi is because the first Final Fantasy he worked on is 12, and 12 is one of my favorite Final Fantasies. I think it's super underrated. I don't think the story's all that interesting, not necessarily bad or anything, but I definitely like the world and the gameplay and stuff of 12 so fucking much, dude. It's such a good game to play.
You could have any materia to use in your daily life. What would you choose?
見破るマテリア。
Why?
やっぱり私いろんな人と関わるんでいろんな人のいい点いろんな情報を知れるのは魅力的です。
That's an interesting choice, I guess, but Bahamut Zero, god damn it. I don't even know, to be honest. If I never thought about like if I could have any one material, what would it be? But it'd be something like either practical that I could use all the time or something broken. W item glitch, IRL, that's what I want.
All right, let's be honest. Who is the coolest Final Fantasy protagonist?
セッツァーです。
Look, I won't speak personally for Final Fantasy VI because I've never actually played it. So I can't argue with that, I guess, is the right way to say that. But I think Cloud's obviously got to be in that conversation because Cloud's, that's his whole personality is trying to be cool. I think he's got a really good cool factor to him. That's why a lot of people gravitated to FF7 growing up when they played it back in the day and all that other shit, right? Because Cloud was that edgy kind of cool protagonist. What I do like besides Cloud, I think Squall's kind of a cool character. He's obviously got the whole emo boy through most of like Final Fantasy VIII, but I think his design's really cool for sure. Zidane I wouldn't necessarily say is cool. I think he's a good character. I obviously love Final Fantasy IX. And like Final Fantasy X is my second favorite Final Fantasy, but I wouldn't necessarily say that Tidus is cool. I want to move forward with some of the other Final Fantasies that I've actually played. Like 12, well, there's not really like a main protagonist, though like Vaughn's supposed to be that, even though it's technically Ash's story. Ash is a hell of a lot cooler than Vaughn is. And with Final Fantasy 15, I think all of the 4 characters from that are pretty damn cool.
Which character is the most different between Final Fantasy VII Original and Final Fantasy VII Remake series?
もう一番やっぱザックスじゃないですかね。
You know, we gotta stop and talk about the Zack related stuff, of course. And actually, speaking of like the cooler Final Fantasy protagonists, I think he could definitely be in that conversation as well. But Zack being very different in the remake project from what he was in the original FF7, obviously that is very literal, regardless of his fate. Whether he's dead or alive, we're getting a lot more Zack, and obviously he's barely in the original FF7.
If all the Final Fantasy villains fought each other, who would come out on top?
ここは私が今リメイクをやってるのでセフィロスでやってほしいですね。
Hamaguchi, I want your legitimate answer, not your biased answer, right? I think Sephiroth is very, very strong, obviously. But there's other like villains in the series that have like fucking like time traveling capabilities, which is like just so impossible to beat. If you're really a villain that could really time travel, you could fucking beat anybody, right? Like there's just no stopping you at all. Now, unless they're trying to give Sephiroth a power upgrade with the remake project, where he potentially has time traveling capabilities and all this other shit. Like I wouldn't say he's the strongest. He could maybe be up there, but I mean, let's be honest, as people point out all the time, like he got destroyed by Cloud. You're talking teenage Shinra grunt Cloud, right? Snuck up on him, got the jump on him. Like he's not that powerful. He can be distracted kind of easily, right? Then again, a lot when it comes to Sephiroth, it's a lot of ego shit because obviously he could have killed Cloud during like the Nippon incident. He could have killed Zack and Tifa and everybody if he wanted to. At the end of Remake, we kick his ass, but he's just fucking with Cloud at the edge of creation, right? And that could also be compilation shit. Livestream Black, he's connected to Cloud. Cloud can't die. That could be a thing maybe with the Remake project. But the end of Remake, he could have fucking destroyed all of us if he wanted to. So there's like an ego thing with Sephiroth. So I guess we've never truly seen him like going pure evil. It's also something they could do with Remake. We haven't really seen Sephiroth like, my goal besides Meteor destroying the planet, my goal is to just fucking slaughter everybody. Because if he just went like that, like everybody's on the list, everybody can get these hands, everybody can die, it'd be kind of interesting to see. Because like who could really fucking stop him?
What does Bigs and Wedge still being alive mean for the story?
そうですね。今作はやっぱりいろんなレイヤーがこう絡み合うこう展開になっているので、そういった意味でもこうその点はこう楽しんでもらいたいところではあります。
I mean, for a very obvious reason, that's an interesting kind of question and answer because we don't have confirmation that Wedge is alive, right? We've seen him get drugged away by the Whisperers on like a really high floor of the Shinra building, but we've never seen him die, right? And it's a very, very common trope in any sort of media that if you don't see the character die, they're probably alive. So more than likely, Wedge is alive, but we don't have confirmation of that. But he asked that question. Hamaguchi didn't correct him. I know this is kind of like a rapid-fire Q&A sort of thing, so it might not matter that it didn't correct him, but it's just kind of a weird question because we don't have confirmation that a better question might have been like Biggs and Jessie because we've seen Jessie and Biggs in the trailers. We've seen Biggs at the end of the game and shit, right? And obviously the Jessie thing is potentially like a VR thing at the Gold Saucer, but still we've seen her. So maybe she's alive, whatever, right? So it's just kind of a weird question.
Did Jessie make it out of Final Fantasy VII Remake alive?
私もそう願ってますけどどうでしょう?
Now they followed up with a Jessie related question. Unless we're doing like timeline shit, it doesn't make sense for Jessie to be alive, in my opinion. Because like the glove at the end of Remake, I know a lot of people like think that that's proof of her being alive, but it doesn't make sense for her to be alive unless like the Whisperers for some reason saved her, which that's like really the only way that makes sense. Because like she was near the top of the tower and Biggs was near the bottom, right? So it makes sense that he could have been saved by somebody or drug himself down to safety or something like that or whatever. But Jessie survived doesn't make sense. Like, there's just no realistic way that somebody would have saved her. And if the plate collapsed, there's no realistic reason that she should have survived that. I guess Wedge did. Like, there's a piece of rubble that falls and somehow Wedge doesn't die to that. I don't know how that happens. So maybe it's a possibility that she could have lived. Actually, speaking of that Wedge thing, I've wanted to talk about that. I've actually wanted to do a video on it before. How does he survive that? Like, he's literally surrounded by the Whisperers. They're trying to ensure his death. There's a big piece of rubble falling down on him. Like, how does him and his cat survive? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, how do the Whisperers not ensure that he dies in that moment?
I assume you would go to a bar called Seventh Heaven.
もちろんコスモキャニオンを頼みます。
Is that like a weird translation or something? Or did he just confirm that there's like a Seventh Heaven bar in Cosmo Canyon? I don't quite understand that.
The CPR mini game still in Rebirth?
あそこはこうちょっと表現を変えているので、ちょっと楽しみにしてください。
It's got to be the first time that I can think of that we've had confirmation that the CPR minigame's returning. It's whatever. It's like, there's so many minigames in the OG FF7. It's like, people love or hate some of them, whatever. A lot of people don't like it. I don't really care for it either, but it's like a whatever minigame. There's a lot of people who didn't want it to come back because, like, they made it weird. Like, they say shit like, you know, Cloud's giving mouth to mouth to a little young underage girl, and it's like, he's not making out with her. He's not kissing her. He's saving her life, you fucking idiot. He's giving her CPR because she was drowning because the bottom swelled and shit, right? Like, you're a weirdo for looking at it that way. You see Cloud giving CPR to a little girl, saving her life, and you make it sexual. It says more about you than it does the game.
Just how safe can Sephiroth get?
セフィロスはこうなんだかんだ言ってクラウドのこと大好きなんで、結果として常に安全なのかもしれないですね。
Actually, the question itself is a bit of a joke. Safer Sephiroth, how safe can Sephiroth get? But I've seen people like shit on the answer that Hamaguchi gives about like Sephiroth caring for Cloud and Cloud's kind of always safe, but it's like, that's true. Especially if Remake itself is like post, you know, FF7, post compilation, whatever, post livestream Black. Like, he's literally attached to Cloud. Cloud cannot die or Sephiroth dies. So like, in reality, he would kind of be protecting Cloud at all costs if he can, because he can't kill Cloud or he dies. But then that kind of question and answer segment there is followed up with a kind of interesting exchange.
I think a certain party member might disagree.
Party member?
Aerith.
ああ、そういうことか。Yes.
Not only are they outright talking about Aerith's fate of Forgotten Capital, in this particular video and in previous interviews and stuff, like, they're outright talking right there about Sephiroth kills Aerith, and then Aerith's fate of Forgotten Capital. You can piece it together if you're a brand new player. Again, why I think things could be different.
Which mainline Final Fantasy game has the best combat system?
はい、やっぱりファイナルファンタジー7リメイクのバトルシステムは非常に自信を持って送れるものになっていると思います。
The answer is pretty obvious though, right? Like, the majority of the Final Fantasy franchise, it's like turn-based / ATB, and then you get to like Final Fantasy 15 where they kind of introduce like the action kind of element, and then 7 Remake, and then 16. And 16's got a cool combat system, but I would say that Remake overall is better.
What is the third game in the Remake series called?
それは野村さんの頭の中にしかないですね。
That part right there, they go on like a long tangent of him like throwing out R words and stuff to try to see what could be the third title. But I thought it was kind of interesting though that he says that it's in Nomura's head what the third title is. So it seems like Nomura is the one that gets to pick the names. I don't know if we've ever known that before. Maybe we have. We probably talked about it on the channel if they've said it before. But it seems like Remake, Rebirth, and whatever the third game is going to be called is up to Nomura, which is kind of cool.
The deal with guns in Final Fantasy. Sometimes they kill someone, other times they just take down a little bit of HP.
あれ私も知りたいんですよね。
Things that honestly bothers me when it comes to Remake, it's the suspension of disbelief. It's like hard to do whenever you get into like a fight and like somebody that uses a gun like shoots you like 40 times and you lose like very little HP from it. And then you get to like the top of the Shinra building and like later in the game and President Shinra has Barrett at gunpoint and Barrett's like terrified and it's like, I was shot 400 times for working my way up to this floor. Why are you scared of that gun? Like, you should be able to tank that shot. Like, you see Cloud block like bullets with like the Buster Sword throughout the game and shit. And it's like, but we get shot all the time over here. And it's just one of those things. It's just you kind of have to just ignore it. But it's hard for me to ignore because it's like we get shot all the time. I've seen people try to defend in the past. It's like what happens in battle isn't the same as what happens in real life, and that's why like Aerith being stabbed by Sephiroth kills her, but being cut and stabbed and shot in battle doesn't kill somebody. And it's just like I can't ignore it though. Like it's just kind of annoying. It just annoys me. I'm gonna be honest.
How do you think people are going to react to that scene? You know the one.
Just talking about the Aerith scene again when it comes to this interview. Him doing a shocked face, I mean, that could be anything, right? I know for some people it's like, that's confirmation she's going to die because you're going to be like shocked and in awe or whatever. But like him being surprised by what we're going to see at the Forgotten Capital, I mean, that could be a million things, dude. It could be her dying, it could be her living, it could be somebody else dying, somebody saving her, Zack appearing. It could be so many fucking things. Is she going to die? Probably. But still, it could be like, who knows? That's it for all the question answers that I think were worth discussing. There's obviously 129 of them, and a pretty large portion of them weren't even about Rebirth. I mean, one of them was, are we going to see a fucking Final Fantasy X-3? That has nothing to do with Rebirth directly. I mean, technically there's a connection between 10 and 7, so there's something there, but it's not a question about Rebirth itself, right? So the title of their video is kind of deceptive because it's not 129 questions about FF7 Rebirth directly, and there's a lot of random questions. They told them to name an object. That's something. That's one of the questions. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? So cool video for what it was. I was just expecting a little more from it because I thought we were going to get 129 questions about Rebirth. And there obviously would be some interesting stuff in that, but a lot of them were just random ass weird questions. So that's pretty much the video, my dudes. What are your thoughts? Did we learn anything from this video? I don't know. Did we? That's the video. Subscribe to me if you guys are new. Session works in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. Just going to go fuzzy, I guess. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.